the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, if you keep on thinking, gosh, there has to be a better way.
Funny you mentioned imposter syndrome. It's a very real thing, and it can be crippling if we allow it to be, right? Hold us back from progress, hold us back from giving our best to the world when we know that we have it, but we're afraid to do it because what will people think? What if I mess up? What if I misstep?
Welcome to Career Compass, mapping your future. Visit yourcareerrevolution.com today to get your free guide on the benefits of working with a career ownership coach. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the show. Today, we are going to talk about breaking the cycle of self-sabotage in your career and what to do about negative thinking. Dr. Mike, currently I'm reading this book called Do More, More Naturally. And one of the things that really stood out at me was this poll done by Gallup in 2023, where they reported that, hear this out, only a third of Americans feel engaged at work. Only a third. That means like what? 66 point whatever percent are disengaged. Further, Zippia surveyed 1,000 people and discovered that at least half of the workforce don't like their job at all. Oh my gosh, life is way too short to be living like this. But why is this? They feel like the underlying reason for many of these individuals is the disengagement caused by the lack of the freedom for people to be themselves. So I think it's perfect to have you on the show with us today to talk about self-sabotage and negative thinking. I mean, let's think about it. What is self-sabotage? What could we do? Who could we be? What could we achieve if we didn't have these limiting beliefs and these little voices in our heads dictating what we can and cannot do, who we can and cannot be, what we can and cannot have? As a matter of fact, if this is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, if you keep on thinking, gosh, there has to be a better way, what I would encourage you to do right now is bookmark the following webpage. Go to yourcareerrevolution.com, and later on after the show, go ahead and browse around. Download a white paper called The Benefits of Working with a Career Ownership Coach. Someone who can help you look beyond your blind spots. Someone who can actually challenge your limiting beliefs, and someone who can just maybe have you self-reflect on what may be going on. Because isn't human behavior fascinating? I am always amazed at the stupid stuff I do. It reminds me of the late Brian Klemmer, who wrote a book. He said, if how-tos were enough, we'd all be skinny, rich, and happy. And I always think about that because how many times do we know what we want and yet we don't do it? Or if we don't know what we want, we definitely know what we don't want. We know what is good for us and what is bad for us. And yet we retreat back to our current comfort zone, right? Even though we hate it, even though we see that progress is not being made. Why is that? I mean, it reminds me of the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So, Dr. Mike, what is the deal with self-sabotage?
Well, thank you very much for that. No, that was an amazing introduction and kind of rollout to the topic. You know, one of the things that the renowned psychologist Carl Rogers said is that which is most personal is most universal. So I think kind of as a fundamental starting point, it's important to realize that if you're feeling that way, right, if you're feeling stuck and wondering if there's more and why is things not better and how can I improve and what's going on, you're not alone. And I love that you gave out that website for resources. It is really a good referral point. So one of the things I think that really contributes to that fundamentally is self-sabotage in the form more specifically of negative thinking. And I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that. I know I've been there many times. So it's really that self-sabotage and the negative thinking. And I think we'll get to this later, but the sneaky thing about self-sabotage and negative thinking is a lot of times we tend to do it on autopilot because of our upbringing, our programming, our circumstances, our emotions. So that's kind of the starting point for this whole discussion, I think.
Yeah. So what was that thing that you said again? What is most personal is actually also universal.
Most universal.
Yeah. So, so I'm not the only crazy one. I think so many times we suffer from imposter syndrome, right? Like, we think people think that maybe we know more, and we're scared that they're going to think we're a fraud, or maybe we just don't have the confidence because it's something we've never done before or something we haven't been exposed to. So, talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and self doubt.
So it's so funny that you mentioned that imposter syndrome because I think we've all heard it, we've all seen it and read about it. But I just like to share a quick story. So when I was in the military, I did 26 years in the Air Force. My final 3 years, I was the first sergeant for the Air Force Thunderbirds. So prior to getting to the team, it was a very, very lengthy application process to even make it through the door to be interviewed by all the officers on the team. So I was in my office one day and got the call from the Thunderbird commander saying that I got hired for the job and I got picked. Like out of all the people that applied, I got it. So I ran out into the orderly room, high fiving people, handing out cigars, kissing babies, called my wife. The very minute I went through that emotional high and sat back down in my chair, the first thing that crept into my mind is, what did I just get myself into?
Mm.
Seriously, the Thunderbirds? Who am I? Like, am I gonna be good enough? So I started playing that game, you know, and I called my wife and kinda told her how I was feeling, and she said, "Well, you know what? If other people believed enough in you to hire you, then why don't you believe in yourself?"
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was a really, really good question that kind of anchored me, allowed me to refocus, reframe, and then just really think through the process again. So it's funny you mentioned imposter syndrome. It's a very real thing. And it can be crippling if we allow it to be, right? Hold us back from progress, hold us back from giving our best to the world when we know that we have it, but we're afraid to do it because what will people think? What if I mess up? What if I misstep? What if I don't deliver what I say I can, right? So you start, the little drunk monkey starts running around in your brain and painting that picture. And it's really easy to fall into that trap of belief until we stop it and challenge it.
Oh my gosh, how wise was your wife, and how to just kind of reframe you're here for a reason. So, anybody listening to us today, if they feel like an imposter or if they have that self doubt, maybe just to sit back for a second and say, I am here for a reason. I was given this position or this responsibility for a reason. I am the exception. I can be better. I can do this. What is the psychology? Like, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we beat ourselves up instead of, pursuing this great adventure?
So, one of the things I truly believe that drives this more than anything else, and I did research on this for both my dissertation and my book,
Mhm.
is the thing we call societal acceptance, right? Or that need for belonging, approval addiction, whatever name you want to associate with it. It's proven by theory, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, McClellan's human motivation theory, and the list goes on. But basically, we as human beings, emotional creatures, search for and look for that societal acceptance, belonging to a tribe, something bigger than ourselves. And craving that, the ironic side of it is that sometimes we can crave that so much that we put the pressure on ourselves to wonder if we're good enough, if we're going to succeed. Can we really fit in? Can we contribute? So I think it's kind of that paradoxical irony, right? That we crave that societal acceptance, but at the same time, we don't want to look bad, right? So then the negative thinking can come in. And what's some of the first things we do? Well, I remember that one time when I tried X and I fell flat on my face, right? So then we got historical association to, well, it happened then, so it's probably going to happen now, right? Without validating. So we let those kinds of things creep in. And it can truly be just a cycle until we choose to consciously become aware of what we're doing, step in and break that cycle.
So, could it ever be that you're truly not part of the tribe that you're supposed to be a part of, and that's why there is resistance? Or is it always that people are looking outside of themselves for acceptance as opposed to accepting themselves from within? What do you think?
So there's been a lot of research on that too, and it's been my personal experience, in some of the paths that I've walked, is self-acceptance can be a pretty hard thing because a lot of times we do look for external validation for that approval and for that worthiness, especially when we're dealing with people that we consider mentors, role models, someone who's important in our life that we don't want to let down. So we do tend to look for that external validation. But again, I think if we can really step into self esteem, self acceptance, self worth, and self love, those things, and being anchored in really what that means and how you're living that by default will take care of everything else. Like it will be your North Star, your guiding light, and all the other stuff will come eventually by default. But if you let that stop you up front, then you could be in for a long, painful journey.
So, how can you then figure out what actually is self sabotage versus what's happening in the environment, right? Because many people are in a job today or in their careers and they suffer from something we call battered career syndrome, right? Because due to no fault of their own, they either being right size, downsize, call it capsize, whatever, right? So, are they truly the victims or are they the victims of self sabotage? And how do you know the difference?
So that's a really, really good question. I think it comes down to number one, objective reality and vulnerability,
Mm,
right? Versus delusion. When you talk about self sabotage and you really peel back the layers of the onion, self sabotage is something that is internally initiated and carried out by you as the
mhm,
person, right? The battered work syndrome, something that's not self sabotage, is driven by external circumstances. So, you have a boss that you don't like really working for, but you need a job to put food on the table.
mm.
You're in part of a team that you really don't align with morally, ethically, values, but again, you need that job. Those are all external things that might make you feel sabotage. But again, that self sabotage is when it's self driven and self inflicted by your beliefs that then create your behaviors, actions, and results. So that's the difference. One is inherently internal, the other is external. Does that make sense?
It does, so as I'm listening to you and as I'm thinking about it, right, it sounds like if you have clarity of who you are and what your aspirations are and what you value, that self-love that you were talking about, then it will be clear to you whether the environment or the company or the organization that you are a part of is in alignment with what you're striving to do and who you're striving to become. And basically you either take action and remove yourself from that, or you can find clarity on the fact that you've actually been all this hurt and the pain that you're feeling is actually self-inflicted. So I'm wondering if there's some strategies that you could suggest, and I think you've already mentioned some of them, but things that you can suggest to help overcome some of this negative thinking, or at the very least catch yourself to say, wait a minute, this is self-inflicted.
Right. Well, and I love that question, and I want to throw out a quote real quick by Henry Ford, and I'm sure that you in the audience have heard it before, right? But if you think you're right, and if you think you're wrong, you're right.
Yeah.
So again, it's all about the thinking, right? So a couple of things that we can do. Some of the most powerful things is the hardest part of that is just again the self-awareness around the times that you're doing it. Like being able to catch yourself. You make a mistake. And I don't know how many times I've done this, but I'll make a mistake. The first thing that pops into my mind is, Doc, what an idiot.
Mm.
Right? I mean, so that kind of sets the stage for what's to follow, right? So in those moments when you could catch yourself and say, now, not give yourself some grace, step back and emotionally detach from the situation, and then look at it logically, right? Look at what happened. Look at what led up to that particular impact moment and decision point, and then really evaluate what caused it. Was it really something that you did? If it was, accept it, fix it, move on. If it wasn't, identify it, work with someone who can help you correct it, and then move on. Another really, really important thing is to find a mentor, someone that you trust, someone that is just crushing it in the areas of life, whether personally or professionally, that you want to crush it, someone you trust with their wisdom, their knowledge, their experience, and their care for you by being a mentor, right?
Mhm.
Those kind of people can pour so much wisdom into you that it's unreal. I still have a couple of mentors today that help me out. Another thing that's really, really important, and you mentioned this up front, a career ownership coach. In this area, in this context of what we're talking about, if this is one of the areas you're struggling with, a career ownership coach, like I do every day, executive leadership coaching, and there's so much value into working with a coach, right? Someone who really truly cares about what success means in your context. And that's really all they care about. They're not in it for themselves. They're not in it for a financial gain. They're not in it to tell you what you should do, but they partner with you. They help you unpack and uncover so then you can align, unlock, and unleash. The fourth thing is, and this is where I'll end it on this because I could go all day, but I think another really important thing is do not be afraid to step into and share your expertise, your wisdom, your passion, and the school of hard knocks that you've gone through in life. So many people walk through life just so full of experience and journeys and things that they can share and want to share and should share because it will impact someone else. But again, we hold ourselves back because of this very topic that we're talking about. So I'll give it a break there on those 4 points and kind of let you respond and give me your thoughts.
Yeah, no, there's so much there that I would love to comment on. I'll start with the last thing that you said, do not be afraid to share. I think when people suffered from battered career syndrome, when they hate their jobs, there's this thought that I must be the only one. There must be something wrong with me. And really, what you're doing is giving people a way to normalize it, right? Now, we don't want to dwell on that either. I think that goes to your first point, right? The awareness of the negative self talk, the things that we tell ourselves, the labels we give ourselves, right? When we do something wrong, do we instinctively say, oh my gosh, what an idiot. I am so stupid. Why? How's that going to be helpful, right? It just reinforces this negative thought pattern. So if we can catch ourselves and realize that is a mindset and then take personal responsibility to figure out the solution. And sometimes it's not going to be evident. And I think that goes to the point where surround yourself with people who you admire, people who you aspire to be like, people who will not sugarcoat things for you, but make you aware of what you're doing and also help you get outside of your comfort zone, right? So, whenever you leave your current comfort zone, it's going to be uncomfortable. But just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's wrong. That's actually a good thing when it's uncomfortable because you're learning and you're growing and actually appreciating that rather than retreating back to what you already know. Because if what you already know and what you're already doing was working for you, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, right?
Yeah, and one other thing I would like to say, it's not unusual. Again, I want everyone to get this and to hear this, right? What we started with, that which is most personal is most universal. Tony Robbins, I don't know how many workshops and recordings I've listened to, but he says that same thing so well, right? All of us, like everyone, at some point in time throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, will go into a point of feeling depressed, sad, emotionally beat up, or distraught, right? That's normal.
Mm.
The difference is when you get there, how quickly you pull yourself up out versus staying there. That's what is going to lead to success and turning the page and starting a new chapter is realizing that you're there in that place, but then pulling yourself back up by some of the techniques that we talked about.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Mike, so much there. I definitely feel like I want to invite you back to another show so that we can dig even deeper. But what I love is you've just normalized this insecurity that many of us are feeling like a fraud, feeling like we're not good enough. And to stop that negative self talk and to start focusing on our success and our strengths, and maybe even redefine what success looks like, right? We cannot let somebody else determine our self worth. that has to come from within. And if your current environment is not doing it for you, know that you have options. So I love the fact that you spoke about mentorship and coaching. A career ownership coach can definitely help you think outside the box. Maybe somebody moved your cheese and you don't even know it. So if your current trajectory of your career is not getting you to where you want to go, maybe that is no longer the path to follow. So thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, I really enjoy your thoughts and your input. Any final words of wisdom for our audience here today?
No, but just it's absolutely my pleasure. I just appreciate everyone's time. And again, just the awareness around this is the key, and you're not alone. So reach out, go to the resources that you mentioned, the website at the beginning. And I'm looking forward to the next discussion so we can unpack this a little bit more.
Absolutely. So go back to yourcareerrevolution.com and download the white paper on why you want to work with a career ownership coach. Thank you so much, Dr. Mine. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go to yourcareerrevolution.com and request your free guide to the benefits of working with a career ownership coach. Thank you so much for listening.